Yes, this is water.
Understood.
No, I interviewed a guy this morning. His first question was, "Is it what's in that?" But it was also 10 o'clock in the morning. But anyway,
Well, we are in the barge line business. And so, yeah, time of day, it's 24/7. Sometimes it doesn't matter.
all right, Roger that. All right, we are recording.
Yes, sir.
So a 45-year career. So I mean, is that total to now?
Yes, sir. 45
Okay,
and counting. Yes, sir.
45. Let's see. So what year did you start?
Sir, 1979.
1979. All right. Welcome back to Between the Levees. I'm joined today by Mr. John Fox, a 45-year industry veteran. I don't know a whole lot about him, but he's been retired from ACBL for 33 years and is still in the industry, functioning in various capacities that we'll discuss here today. Mr. Fox, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Trigo. Appreciate it.
When did you first find out about this podcast?
Sir, I think it was Mr. Kanoy. You had interviewed Mr. Kanoy, and I saw it online. And then I have a very good friend, Miss Allison Wheatley, and I think you interviewed her. And she sent me a copy of the podcast, which we were excited to watch. And we kind of been watching since. I've seen you interview Mr. Morton, I believe, Frank Morton, if I'm not mistaken.
A
And
couple of times, yes, sir.
yes, sir. And I think Mr. Canoy a couple times. So we have seen it and kind of enjoy it and stamp on it. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Where did you first meet Allie?
Sir, I met her at ACBL. Gosh, I don't remember the date. And historian, I'm not. It's probably 5 years ago, and she was hired. She was one of the brightest young ladies that I've had the privilege to train, and she flourished quickly and just a wonderful lady. And she left ACBL. I believe she went to Lafarge, and then she got out of the barge line business for a while. I think she's living up in Michigan. And like I say, I had a privilege to be at her wedding, and just a nice lady. She's a good lady.
Absolutely. Well, let's backtrack a little bit. Your career began in 1979. Tell me how you found yourself in it, and maybe paint a picture of the industry back in '79, the competitive landscape, maybe the number of barges. I mean, what was the job back then?
Sir, I'm one of four. I have two brothers and a sister. My sister is 9 months or 9 years and 51 months older than me. I always said I was a bonus. They have other words that they use for it. My brother was a night watchman for Sioux City and New Orleans barge lines. And my brother-in-law also took the same job at one point. My brother had quit, became a school teacher for a short time, and then he came back. There was a job opening. He came back and started with SCNO, and there was a job opening, and he asked if I'd be interested, and so they hired me. I had to wait till I was 18. I was a little bit young. I graduated at 17. When I turned 18 in September, they hired me, and we worked at. I grew up and lived in Hartford, Illinois. It was between Mel Price, which Lock 26 and Lock 27. It was just north of the confluence of the Mississippi River and the Mississippi and the Missouri River, and then just upriver where the Illinois and the Upper Miss meet. And they had a shop barge, Mr. Cole, and which, by the way, is they still being used at McGinnis at South Point, which is kind of cool. And I worked on a shop barge, and I went to college during the day, and then in the afternoon I would work with the barge cleaning crew or the mechanics, whatever they needed. If we had an overhaul, I would do that. Now we clean barges, do whatever, build, tow, help, whatever we did. In the afternoon, I'd clean up the shop barge, make sure everything's locked up. If they need anything, they would call me. And gosh, that's where it started.
And how many companies, I guess, were there in the industry back then? But was your watchdog servicing various barge lines or just SCNO?
Now, predominantly just SCNO. Like I say, we were located above Lock 27. They ran the Illinois River, predominantly the Missouri River. And so we would clean barges, repair them, work on the boats. And it was predominantly for Sioux City and New Orleans is what we did. I mean, if, yeah, we could make some extra money. Somebody had something, we would try and do that. But 95% of the work was all SCNO, sir.
How how exposed were you to other barge lines at the time?
It's really funny because I really wasn't. I mean, I took a job as a young man. Um, really wasn't familiar with the business. Um, that evolved over time. I've heard of Federal Barge Line. They were, I don't believe they were in existence at that point in time. Wisconsin was still in business. Um, Rates were very good. As I look back on it, at the time, I had no clue about rates, had no idea about the business at all. I mean, I'm just a young man cleaning barges, going to school, having fun growing up. And, you go to school all morning, you work all evening, you burn a candle at both ends, if you will, and then do it all again the next day. And the yeah, it was interesting. Great years, 1979, the early 70s, into the early 80s, and then all of a sudden, uh, the posture of the industry changed, and the business went a little bit downhill. And of course, SCNO ended up selling, and it was kind of very interesting how it all came about. The fun thing is, I remember I played ball all my life when I grew up. Small town. It was really a refinery town, but the river was 2 miles away. Uh, got involved in the river industry, my first true job, really, if you will. And we would play softball. Mr. Leaker, uh, Tom Toretti, they started a league, a CGB softball league, and we would play with the Valley Barge Line, CGB, Jefferson Barracks Marine Service. There were a bunch of a softball league basically, and I loved playing ball. And we would play ball and got very challenged. I remember our first softball tournament at Johnny Mack Park in St. Louis, and the next year I remember we had a dozen teams, 20 teams. Next year it turned into 50. And I remember I played in it 18 years in a row, finally missed one year in my 19th year, and then continued to play in that, and saw the evolution of the industry that way. There were lots of teams, lots of companies, and now we're at 2024 and those companies have dwindled. It's not like it used to be. It's amazing. It's amazing industry. Change is just incredible. I mean, if you don't like change, you won't like the industry, but it's a great industry to be in.
Well, where did your career take you next?
Well, I was at SCNO 7 years, 8 years, 7.5 years, got married, and it was imminent that we were going to be sold to Valley Barge Line. And I talked to my vice president, Mr. Jeff Kavinsky, and he said, John, you have an opportunity to work for Jefferson Barracks Marine Service with Mr. George Foster, just a wonderful human being. And he said, I would suggest you take it. Problem was, it was 4 nights on, 4 nights off. Great for me, but for my wife, wasn't so spectacular. And so I worked there for a year. After a year, I had a chance to go to American Barge and Towing, and that was with Mr. Moore and Mr. Scott Putman. Mr. Putman worked at SCNO, and they hired me. I worked there a year, and then Ingram Barge Line bought American Barge and Towing. And at that time, I had an opportunity to come to ACBL in St. Louis at Arsenal Island, and I took that opportunity and gosh, sir, 33 years later, I'm still here.
Well, I guess walk me through step by step. What was the job you were doing for I think you said it was American Barge.
Yes, sir, American Barge Line. I went to Jefferson Barracks Marine Service. I was at SCNO. I did a lot of things. I was a fleet dispatcher, insurance, payroll, ran the warehouse, did crew changes for them. If they needed a mechanic, I would help them with that. I basically, the industry is 24/7. I have a very good friend here that came from AEP, Mr. Dave Hain. And when he first started, he said, "When can I leave?" And his boss said, "When the job's over." And he said, "But my boss never told me the job's never over." And I thought, well, yeah, how true is that? Great statement. And when I went to Jefferson Barracks Marine Service, when I left Sioux City, I was a fleet dispatcher. And when I went to Jefferson Barracks, I did the same thing. I was a fleet dispatcher. And when I started at ACBL, I did something I said I would never do. And I was a crew dispatcher. And we ran the fleets. And I had a couple good port captains I worked with, Jerry Inman and Jerry King. And gosh, I remembered why all those years ago I said I'd never be a crew dispatcher because, we came ACBL bought. It was funny. Valley was going to buy SCNO. It was imminent. They didn't. It was ACBL that ended up buying. So all the boats that they ran, they had some of the Peanut Hollinger boats, and then they bought some of or didn't buy, but they got some of the JB boats, and it was kind of a separate but equal facilities. We were called ACTC, American Commercial Towing Company. So part of ACBL, but separate. And they said, take your time, do this right, Then all of a sudden, a week later, they said, look, we got to have everything around it. So if you were a warm body, we were trying to hire you. And back then, it's not like today. There was, a lot of people that were willing to come out and do the work. And so I did that for a couple of years. And I got a call from Mr. Denny Hill. Denny Hill used to work at ACBL, and he said, "John, would you be interested to run the fleets here in Louisville, Jeff Fleet, just above McAlpine Lock?" And I talked with my wife, and so we moved. And I ran the fleets there for a while until I got an opportunity to join the dispatch group at the corporate office in Jeffersonville, and the rest is history from there.
And what areas did you dispatch out of Jeffersonville?
Oh, golly, sir. My worst river is the upper Mississippi River. I have dispatched it before. Um, I know Minnesota, La Crosse, all the way down in Oval Locks. That's my worst river. Beyond that, I started on the Illinois River when I started fleet dispatching. Um, gosh, I've done a lot. I've had the privilege to do a lot. I've done barge maintenance with them. Um, I was a system planner for the Ohio, Tennessee, Cumberland, Lower Miss, East and West Canal, Illinois River, St. Louis. Uh, did unit tows, and if I'm not mistaken, I think you're familiar with chemical barges, if I remember correctly, in the liquid side of things.
Becoming familiar. I started dispatching with the liquid steam over here about 4 months ago.
Sure.
So
And
it's
you
still
have
pretty
a
fresh.
handful. Yeah, that's a new life for me. And having the privilege and the honor to do those things, it just opened my eyes to a brand new world. We're really a customer driven industry, and chemical barges are a beast of their own, if you will. Uh, Interesting, we did like I say, I was a liquid dispatcher, and I was over the liquid group at ACBL for a while, and I did unit tow planning. And it was amazing when I did unit tow planning of how much my eyes were open. There were some captains, some of them for National Marine, they were from all over. And these guys are absolutely amazing. I mean, they would run the Red River, they'd run the Black River. I've even heard people running up the Apalachicola, which is on the East Canal up to Bainbridge, Georgia, um, out Brownsville. These guys went places and could do things that it opened up the industry for me and brought me a great appreciation for what those guys, our guys, our captains, the pilots, people that operate our industry, how knowledgeable and how precise they are every day in their job. It just amazed me. It's just unbelievable.
It's been absolutely fascinating. I spent 7 years in trucking and warehousing prior to finding the job with AEP, and it was certainly eye-opening. All the activity that happens between the levees, especially down below Baton Rouge. Um, the jobs I've had, just all the ACBL fleets after the acquisition of AEP, and then with Ingram now for 6 years. I think I'm coming up on 6 next month. Um, I got to see canals. I got to see a lot of different things that I've never even imagined. Growing up in New Orleans, I mean, I saw ships passing over the levee, but no idea what was going on out there.
Mr. Triga, one of the things I love most about this industry, I've been here 45 years, and if I said I knew everything, I would be such a big liar. In 45 years, and I still today am learning something new every day. And it is such a dynamic industry. And I've had the privilege to work with a lot of great people, and I've had the privilege to train and mentor a lot of wonderful folks. And in that time, I found out that the more I do it, the more I learn every day. It's just so fascinating. And it just blows me away. I love this industry. Like I say, it's the biggest well kept secret in the country. I mean, every day you watch trucks carry and haul stuff on your highways. You watch trains pass every day, but to see a boat and a barge, uh, it, unless you're really looking for them, it's not something you see every day. It's amazing. And the amount of commodity and the technology and the safe, it's just unbelievable how many chemicals, how much product we carry and move every day down the waterways of this country, from Pittsburgh to Minnesota to Lamont, down to New Orleans and back. And very rarely do you hear of those problems that occur. Unfortunately, they do. It's part of every industry, but it just amazes me how skilled uh, this industry is, and how technically skilled they are, and how great these people really are to handle this stuff.
How frequently did you find yourself out on boats over the years?
Sir, when I first started, it was pretty local. If they needed a deckhand to help make a lock through lock 26 or 27, I would do that. My last few years at ACBL, it was mandatory that you ride a boat. Um, any chance I had to get on a vessel, I loved it. And if I have one regret in my 45 years, is that I didn't take that opportunity enough, because I would have loved to watch these guys master these waterways. Like I say, it would have been great to take a trip from Minnesota to St. Louis, Lamont to St. Louis, St. Louis to New Orleans, Pittsburgh to Cairo, Cairo to, and to have that opportunity. I would love to do that. Unfortunately, I was in my most of my career, I was more shoreside than anything. But I remember one of my favorite memories is catching the motor vessel Lexington from Sioux City, New Orleans, below Lock 27 with Mr. Jack Hines. He was the vice president at the time. and we boarded the vessel and rowed it up to Mobile Island. And such great memories of just being on and seeing the boats. And my brother Jim actually played a significant role in my career. Uh, Overall, he was the first one to hire me at Sioux City. He also was instrumental of getting me a job with the ACBL, and he was the one that got me on that boat ride. And it kind of gets in your blood. I hate to say it, it's interesting, but it gets in your blood, and once it gets in, it's gosh, it's there to stay.
Yeah, tell me about it. How did your brother end up finding his way into the industry?
Sir, he, like I say, he started as a night watchman for Sioux City and New Orleans. Uh, he left to take a teaching job, and back in those days, believe it or not, uh, they were talking about cutting back on teachers. A job came back open at Sioux City, and he accepted it. And he had started as a night watchman at Sioux City. And when I was graduating high school, they were looking for some help, and he asked me if I was interested. Well, great story is, so he moved when I left ACBL. I'm sorry, Sioux City before ACBL bought him. My brother stayed, and they retained his services, and he ended up moving to Kentucky to Louisville, working in Jeffersonville, Indiana, their main office. The week that I got offered a job here was the week he got transferred to New Orleans. So we stayed at his house. My wife and I, we had a 4-bedroom house, 3 bathroom. We had a microwave and an ice box, both of which were sold, but they wouldn't let them take them until we got into our house. Had a single bed and a card table. That's it. This big house. And they had just moved out to New Orleans, and we moved here, and we've been here, gosh, 2 kids and 33 or 30 years later, I guess. Yeah.
Well, how did Jim find his way to SCNO? Was there any connection to the industry prior to that?
No, sir, I don't believe so. My brother-in-law, my only sister's husband, worked as a night watchman. My brother-in-law took a job as a night watchman. We grew up in Hartford, Illinois. It's a small town, 2,200 people, like I say, between Lock 26 and 27. It was built as a refinery town. The refineries had moved in. They basically built the town up, but we're 2 miles from the river, from the Mississippi River, the Upper Miss, and National Maintenance had a spot there. Economy had a spot. SCNO moved in, and my brother was a night watchman. My brother-in-law was a night watchman, and that's how they started in the business. They got me interested in it, and gosh, 45 years later, I've had the privilege of being part of this industry.
I assume this to be true across the industry, not just at ACBL or at Ingram or at AEP or anywhere, but there tends to be a disconnect between shoreside dispatchers and the mariners out there on the water. In
Great,
your experience, what have you seen, and um, I guess how best did you try to reduce the disconnect between shoreside and on the water?
Mr. Triggle, great question, great observation. Again, when I was SCNO, we would clean barges, we would repair barges, we'd do whatever, and we would bill tow. So you get some dead time, we'd bill tow. And you put together a 15 barge tow to make the lockdown, from Mobile Island to St. Louis. All of a sudden you get a call and say, we got to tear this barge out of tow. Okay, which barge? Well, of course, it couldn't be one of the outside corners. It had to be the one in the middle. Well, being a sailor, if you will, right? Uh, some of the verbiage wasn't always the best, and people weren't always real happy about it. And you tear the barge out, you rebuild the tow, and that 12 hours that you'd spent doing all that, here you do it, redo it again. Really interesting. I've had the privilege again of working with Tennessee Valley Towing, and we work a good deal with Ingram. And from the shore side, I go over the orders from the office, and the orders from the office say, take this barge here, take this barge here, take this barge here. The next day it says, now we want to take this barge here. And I think I mentioned it earlier, this really is a customer driven industry. I mean, we're here to serve the customer. I wish we had a vice president, and I don't remember exactly who it is, but he quoted one of the best lines I think I've ever heard. Somebody asked him, "What do you do?" And he said, "You know what? I feed the world." And what a great line. And we do. This is what's so powerful about this industry. But again, it's customer driven, and the information changes dramatically. Um, Specifically on the chemical side of the business. I mean, the chemical side of the business is almost a daily thing. And I try to tell the men on the boats, and they're the ones that do all the work. And I tell them all the time, or I try to, for me, if it costs me 30 minutes, an hour to change stuff, I'm okay with it. I try to look after the guys, but it's customer driven. And you schedule a barge out, and all of a sudden somebody does something crazy and cleans it for you. Well, changes where the barge may need to go. Liquid customer may need product bad up to Decatur, but then all of a sudden it becomes worse. Now they need it in Joliet, and all the work you do, it changes everything. And it's a 24/7 business. It's a 5 mile an hour business, but guess what? It changes as quickly as you turn around. And I always try and tell them, look, if it doesn't work for you, we may not have an alternative, but let's talk about it and see what we can do. But yes, sir, I mean, the shore side, unfortunately, the guys on the boat, all they see is the hard work. All they see is the day to day. They're trying to plan. And I feel so sorry for our captains because there's different dispatchers. For one, I throw stuff against the wall, see where it sticks to make sure I got it scheduled so I can plan out. These guys see it and they start planning immediately. And within, gosh, 6 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours, it all changes. And it's part of the industry, but that's, again, we're customer driven. We're trying to do what's best for our customers. And, I hope the guys would understand that many times we're being compensated for it. On the other hand, does that change the work that these guys put in? No. And as safe and as hard as these guys work, it's great. Anytime they have to do something extra, I feel for them because I've done that. And I've done that personally. Not as much as they have, but I've got to see both sides of it. And as basically I've been more shoreside than I have being on the river, unfortunately, kind of, but I can understand it and I see it. And when you get that question, what a great question, because I hope the guys understand. Most of them do. Most of the wheelhouse do. I know the deck crew's never fond of it, and I can understand it.
If I found out nothing else, dispatching liquids is that revisions are gonna happen every day.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, I agree with that. But communicating with these captains was actually one of the catalysts for this podcast. To talk through some of the things that I discussed privately on the phone with these guys, discussing order changes and their own histories and policies and procedures and challenges. It's been absolutely fascinating. I think,
Hey, Mr. Triggle, to your
yes, sir.
point, I always try to tell all my captains, look, if you see something that I'm doing wrong, for me to fix it, it may cost me an hour or two, but if it saves your guys an hour, it's worth the time. If I can do it, fine. If I can't, that's okay too. And orders are going to change, things are going to change. Chemical barges take priority, always have. Um, Depending on the market, loads are usually more of a priority than empties, depending on the market, obviously, and where you're at. Um, Specific products become an industry. I know there's a company in New Johnsonville that unload chemical salt. And if they run out of chemical salt, it's $1 million a day. And the guys on the boat may or may not necessarily know that. And so you deal with those situations, and it's about timing. Barge comes from New Orleans up to Cairo, Cairo to Paducah, Paducah to New Johnsonville. It's a 5 mile an hour business, and every day can be extremely important for some of these folks. And those are and chemicals are the same way. I mean, everybody at one point there would be a stockpile of inventory for some people. That's become passe, if you will. And people have learned they don't stockpile as much for cost and inventory reasons, etc. And so it's become a little bit more of a just-in-time type of industry. And of course, you're only moving 5 miles an hour. You're not driving a truck or driving a train, but we still are as important as either of those industries. And those are things that sometimes the people on the boat aren't as privy to, don't always have the insight to. And I try and share that with the folks as much as I can. And I'm just telling you, these captains and these guys on the boats are so intelligent, and they're so skilled, and 99.9% of the time they understand it when you explain it to them. Problem is, people don't take the time to want to communicate and share that with them. And I can understand how that can cause some frustration from being on both sides, even though I've been more on one than the other. I've seen it, been there, and I can understand it. That's a great question, a great point, sir.
I think that's as good a place to stop as any, Mr. Thanks. I do appreciate your time this evening. Do you think your brother would be interested in hopping on?
Sorry, I think you would, and I think you would enjoy it. My brother retired from ACBL. He spent some time down in Venezuela, spent some time in New Orleans. He's been in the business. Well, now he's been just a little less than I have. Still has some involvement, knows a lot of people. And if it's okay with you, what I'll do is I'll text him your text and copy you and me on it and tell him. And I think he'd be very interested. I think you'd find that more fascinating than talking to this old goat. I can tell you that.
Well, I have to take your word for it, sir. Again, I do thank you very much.
No, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And I appreciate the opportunity to share with you and to know you a little better. It's kind of cool. I like it. Oh, by the way, sir, happy birthday. And kudos for the mention in the Wall Street Journal. I think, didn't you mention you got mentioned in the Wall Street Journal?
I don't believe so.
Maybe I misread it. I'll have to go back and look. I think somebody wrote a book and you had
No,
interviewed
no,
everybody.
no. That was my last guest. Put that published on yesterday, actually, on June 8th. He published a book about the river.
Okay.
And
Okay,
his
right.
episode published yesterday. I'd love for you to check that one out whenever you have a
I would
chance.
love to, because I saw it on one of the streams, and I read a little bit about it. I was like, oh, this is cool. But I thought you got kudos in the Wall Street Journal. I thought you said you got a little kudo in there. I thought that's cool.
No,
Either way, it's kind of neat,
yeah, no, I shared that to promote my previous guest's book. It actually finishes on Tuesday, June 11th, 2 days from now. The link to pre-order your copy is in the episode description.
That's cool. I'll check that out. I'll be excited to see that one. But it's been fun staying up with you. We have a friend, Captain Rusty Ball. He worked for ACBL for a while. He's with another company now, I believe. And every morning there's like 50 of us that he copies, says good morning. And it's kind of cool because you stay up with a lot of friends that you knew, that you've made, and it's really cool. And the one thing I can say, I always told all the kids I trained, don't burn any bridges. This business is too small, and the guy that's your janitor today probably going to be your boss tomorrow. And it's such a great industry. Just love it and appreciate what you do. And again, thank you for the opportunity to share with you. I really appreciate this. This means a lot to me. It's kind of neat.
No problem at all, sir. Thank you very much.
You have a wonderful evening. God bless you. And thank you.
You too, sir. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.